The first pulse struck before the hatchling reached Gareth Lorne's hands. A blue-white shimmer ran through the response harness around its narrow chest. The creature stiffened in the freight sling, wing sails clamping so tightly against its sides that the translucent membranes disappeared beneath dull slate scales. A moment later, the harness chimed to announce that it had issued the command. The handlers laughed because they saw only the delay. Gareth saw the order had arrived second. Above them, the Sundrift Orchard convoy drifted through Mariloon's violet dusk. Broad, growing platforms suspended beneath gas bladders, their terraces heavy with amber fruit and black-leafed vines. Long root streamers trailed from every railing. They leaned east, relaxed, then snapped west as the upper atmosphere changed its mind. Keeper Male Quora stood beside the hatchling crate in his silver handler's coat. The coat bore narrow, stitched bars showing how many dragons had passed his grading table. Gareth had no such bars. He had a rolled root charter under one arm and dust from the freight lift on his boots. Male tilted the sling toward him. "For the human cartographer," he announced, "a dragon suited to a ground-bound species." The nearby handlers made the restrained, clicking sound the Idrin used when they wanted to laugh without appearing disorderly. The hatchling looked smaller than the sling. Its legs trembled. Its wing joints were too sharp beneath the skin, and the membranes had the cloudy look of fabric dried in the wrong shape. One eye opened. It was dark and steady despite the shaking body. Gareth slid his root charter beneath his belt and took the sling with both arms. "What is its name?" he asked. Male's mouth flattened. "Failed stock is not named before disposal." The hatchling reacted again. Its throat tightened. The harness lit after it. Gareth looked down at the small slate head. "Kest," he said. "That is not an Idrin word." "No." Male waited for an explanation. Gareth did not give him one. The convoy's departure bells rang through the orchard platforms. Workers released mooring fins. The long chain of floating gardens began moving toward the darker band of sky, where Mariloon's magnetic currents bent around the planet. Male handed Gareth a feeding capsule, a harness key, and a thin slate of instructions. "Keep it alive until the next anchor platform," he said. "That will be more than its clutch expected." Gareth glanced at the slate. Every instruction began with a command interval. He carried Kest away while the handlers turned back to animals that snapped, flared their sails, and struck their training marks the instant the harnesses flashed. His assigned quarters were beneath the root deck, in a narrow room that smelled of rope resin and wet bark. A circular window looked down through mist at the orchard roots dangling below the platform. Gareth placed the freight sling beside the window, folded his coat into a shallow nest, and lifted Kest free. The hatchling weighed almost nothing. It flinched when his hand passed over its head. Gareth changed direction and slid his palm beneath its chest instead. Kest allowed that, though its claws tightened painfully against his skin. He opened the feeding capsule. A warm gel, rich with minerals and cultivated insect protein, rose to the rim. He touched a small amount to Kest's mouth. The hatchling turned away. He tried again. It pressed itself flat to the coat. The instruction slate advised a stimulation pulse. Gareth placed the harness key against the clasp. The coils brightened. Kest's pupils widened before the first spark crossed the metal. Gareth stopped. The room settled into the small noises of travel. Orchard roots brushing the lower hull, root streamers tapping the rail above, pipes ticking as the platform changed altitude. He unlocked the harness and drew it away. Kest did not move. Gareth poured a little gel into his palm and rested his hand on the floor between them. "You can refuse," he said quietly, "but the offer stays." He waited. The convoy slid deeper into dusk. The gel cooled against his skin. His shoulder cramped. Somewhere overhead, an officer called for the new cartographer, then called again. Kest lifted its head. The hatchling crawled forward in a series of uncertain movements. It stopped with its nose above Gareth's palm and remained there so long that he wondered whether it had forgotten what it wanted. Then its tongue touched the gel. It drank, retreated, and placed a claw in the center of his hand. Gareth did not close his fingers around it. By the time Kest slept, his introduction meeting was over, and the convoy master had reassigned the route briefing to an assistant. Gareth sat at the little desk with his untouched charts spread before him and watched the hatchling's ribs rise beneath the folded coat. The empty harness lay on the floor between them. In the days that followed, Kest continued to confound every rule on Mael's slate. It would not eat while a field coil was active. It would not tolerate a hand descending from above. It refused the bright heated cradle and chose the shadow beneath Gareth's desk. When frightened, it did not hiss or bite. It folded inward until it seemed to be trying to leave the world through its own bones. But it watched everything. It watched the root streamers change direction beyond the window. It watched the thin compass threads that hung above Gareth's drafting table. It watched Gareth leave a gap in every projected path where Mariloon's currents became too variable to promise certainty. Each evening he set food in his palm and waited. At first Kest approached only when the room was still. Later it came while he worked. Later still, it arrived before he opened the capsule and sat beside his boot, staring at his closed hand with grave expectation. The waiting never vanished. Kest always paused before choosing. Gareth learned not to fill the pause. That lesson should have been enough to keep him from hurting it. It was not. Mael arrived during a route review with junior handlers behind him. He inspected Kest's weight, the narrowness of its breastbone, the collapsed wing sails. His expression grew colder with every observation. You removed the response harness. It was interfering with feeding. It was teaching compliance. Kest reacts before the pulse. Mael looked at him as if Gareth had mistaken rain for smoke. The pulse begins the response. The body moves first. Then its body is convulsing. That is worse. Gareth showed him the root thread recordings he had made. The threads bent whenever the harness charged, and Kest's wing joints tightened just before the visible field shimmer. Mael barely glanced at them. A cartographer sees patterns because he is paid to draw them, he said. A keeper sees animals because he is trained to know them. He ordered an assisted wing extension. Gareth should have refused. Instead, he let the threat of losing Kest make the decision for him. He fitted soft loops around the hatchling's wrists and followed Mael's instructions. The coils remained at low power. Gareth told himself the setting was gentle. He told himself a controlled movement would prove whether the membrane could bear weight. Kest planted its claws and folded away. Continue, Mael said. Gareth eased the left wing outward. The membrane trembled. A pale line appeared along the inner seam. Kest looked at Gareth. There was no accusation in the dark eye, only attention. Release it, Gareth said. Not yet. The harness pulsed. Kest jerked before the light arrived. The pale line opened. The sound was small, like wet paper tearing. Gareth dropped the loop. Kest collapsed beneath the desk, one wing dragging behind it. Mael swore at the animal's fragility. Gareth heard only the scrape of claws seeking the deepest shadow. He treated the tear after the handlers left. He mixed sealant with cooling gel, worked it along the split membrane, and kept his hands where Kest could see them. The hatchling endured the care but would not touch him. When the dressing was finished, Gareth dismantled the harness coil by coil. He left the pieces on his desk beside the unfinished route charts, where anyone entering the room would know what he had done. That evening he placed food in his palm. Kest remained beneath the desk. The gel cooled. The route deck called for revised passage marks. Gareth did not answer. Long after the orchard lamps dimmed, Kest crept forward. It stopped beyond his reach. Gareth lowered his hand to the floor and looked away. The hatchling did not come. For several more evenings, it would eat only after he left the room. Gareth did not blame it. He changed everything. He stopped measuring progress by how far Kest's wing could open. He measured whether the animal chose to leave the shadow. He stopped lifting it onto the exercise shelf. He built a sloped path from bark panels and let Kest decide whether to climb. He removed every device that chimed, flashed, or tightened without warning. The work cost him sleep first. Then it cost him reputation. Routes across Mariloon's dusk belt could not be hurried. Gareth had been hired because humans were unusually good at working with incomplete models, but incomplete did not mean careless. He spent the bright half of each cycle on the upper deck reading streamers, route sway, cloud glow, and the faint bending of compass threads. He spent the dark half beside Kest, wading through small choices that no official record considered work. His route revisions arrived late. The convoy master sent warnings. Mail sent inspection notices. Kest began climbing the bark slope. It would reach the upper ledge, breathe hard, then turn and descend before its legs failed. Gareth never blocked the return. After each attempt, he opened his palm. Sometimes Kest ate, sometimes it walked past. The torn membrane healed with a silver ridge. Weeks of dusk drifted beneath the convoy. The orchards changed fruiting cycles. Amber clusters were harvested, and new blossoms opened black against the lavender sky. Kest grew slowly. Its body lengthened. Muscle gathered along the breastbone. The dull slate scales took on a faint sheen when the magnetic lights rippled beneath the clouds. The wing sails remained folded most of the time, but no longer limp. One evening, Gareth returned from the root deck and found Kest sitting on his charts. The dragon had ignored the feeding capsule. Instead, it held one of his blank root markers between its teeth. "That is not food." Kest bit down, the marker cracked. Gareth opened his palm. Kest looked at it, looked at the broken marker, and placed the pieces neatly in his hand. He laughed for the first time since the membrane tear. Kest startled, then leaned forward as if inspecting the sound. The next morning it climbed the bark slope before he prepared food. At the top it paused. Gareth stayed at the bottom with his palm open. Kest raised the injured wing. The membrane unfolded to half its span. It trembled there, translucent against the window's violet light. Gareth could see the silver scar and a branching network of dark lines that seemed to shift beneath the surface. Kest lowered the wing before it shook apart. Gareth closed his hand only after the dragon stepped onto it. During the next drift, Gareth carried the bark path to the lower root gallery, where the orchard platform's suspension ribs formed a long tunnel above open mist. He laid narrow strips of cloth between the ribs, making a route Kest could follow without jumping. Kest crossed the first span and stopped at the second. Nothing blocked it. The cloth lay flat. Gareth crouched at the far end and opened his palm, careful not to turn the gesture into a demand. Kest looked past him toward the mist. A heartbeat later, the suspension rib gave a low, metallic shiver. The cloth strip lifted as a field ripple passed beneath the platform. Had Kest stepped when Gareth expected, the movement would have thrown its healing wing against the rail. The hatchling waited until the rib settled, then crossed. Gareth sat back on his heels. "All right," he murmured, "you read the road too." From then on, he stopped choosing every exercise path alone. He carried Kest to the entrance of the root gallery, set down alternate cloth routes, and let the dragon inspect them. Some evenings it chose the shorter path. Sometimes it turned away from both and returned upstairs. Once it selected the longer route, then refused the final span until Gareth noticed a loose fastening beneath the cloth. Their work became less like training and more like drafting a chart together. Gareth offered possibilities. Kest found the dangers he had missed. Neither moved until both were ready. At the end of that drift, Kest reached Gareth's open palm, ignored the food resting there, and pressed its narrow forehead against his wrist. The contact lasted only a breath. It was the first touch Kest had initiated since the torn membrane. Gareth remained still until the dragon withdrew. Mail came that afternoon. He looked at the dismantled harness, the late route warnings, and Kest's ungraded growth record. "You have confused attachment with treatment," he said. "I confused obedience with health first." Mail's jaw tightened. The convoy enters the field braid after the next fruit transfer. Every dragon aboard must respond without delay. A slow animal becomes a falling platform. Kest is not slow. "You keep saying that." Gareth pointed toward the window. The root streamers had begun a shallow oscillation, east to west, east again. Kest watched them from the ledge, head moving not with the cloth but with something beneath its motion. "Watch before the next turn," Gareth said. Mail did. Kest's wing joints tightened. A breath later, the streamers snapped west. Mail's expression did not change. "Coincidence?" He ordered Kest removed at the next anchor, unless it passed a standard response test. After he left, Gareth sat on the floor beside the dragon. I cannot make you pass it, he said. Kest studied his open palm. The root deck bell rang before it could approach. A mild field reversal had struck the outer orchard. Gareth ran upward. Kest followed. The upper deck had become a blur of torn leaves and whipping streamers. A canopy over the young fruit terraces had pulled loose along one edge. Workers fought the lines while the platform rolled beneath them. Gareth caught a support cable and clipped it to a mechanical clamp. The indicator showed green. He leaned across the rail to catch the second line. The field reversed. The clamp opened too early. The cable snapped across the deck, wrapped Gareth's waist, and dragged him toward the edge. He struck the rail hard enough to lose his breath. Below, mist opened around the hanging orchard roots. The loose canopy ballooned outward, pulling him over. Kest stood beside the torn support. The dragon could have fled below deck. Instead, it seized the crossbar in both foreclaws and spread its half-grown sails. The current caught them. Kest slid. Gareth reached for the knife at his belt, but the cable had pinned his arm. The canopy pulled again. Kest's claws carved bright lines through the wood. Gareth raised his free hand. Not a command. An open palm. Kest looked at it. The field indicators screamed for immediate release. Workers shouted. The streamers snapped, then began to fold back. Kest waited. The dragon released the crossbar during the quiet between reversals. The canopy collapsed inward instead of tearing away. The cable slackened. Gareth fell onto the deck. Kest landed badly, rolled, and came up beside him with wings folded tight. For a moment, neither moved. Then Kest placed one claw in the center of Gareth's palm. A mechanic had seen everything from the lower stair. By sunset, the story had reached Mail. He came with the response harness already charged. One lucky pause does not rewrite handling law. It was not luck. Then prove it. The stronger pulse struck Kest before Gareth could block the coil. The dragon folded to the deck. Its wing sails went rigid. The branching dark lines beneath the membranes flashed silver, then vanished. Kest's breathing stopped for a terrible instant. Gareth tore the harness leads from Mail's hands. The field snapped across his arms, numbing them to the shoulder. Mail stepped back. You have endangered the convoy. You are doing this to it. I am measuring what it is. No, you are preventing what it is becoming. The gathered workers fell silent. Mail's face changed, not into guilt, but into the closed stillness of authority challenged in public. He revoked Gareth's route charter on the deck. Kest was reclassified as unusable freight. At the next maintenance platform, both were put ashore with Gareth's charts, a food crate, and a storm shelter. The Sundrift convoy drifted on without them. The maintenance platform was little more than a metal disc beneath a buoyancy bladder, used for repairing route beacons between migrations. No orchard softened it. No roots hung beneath. Only railings, a dead signal mast, and a circular shelter bolted to the center. Mail left the harness unlocked on the deck. Kest stood beside it. Beyond the rail, the sky was open in every direction. Gareth removed the last band from the dragon's chest. You can go, he said. Kest looked toward the receding orchards. The convoy's amber lamps moved through violet cloud like a broken necklace. The dragon spread its wings. They were larger than Gareth had realized. The once cloudy membranes now held dark branching structures from shoulder to tip. Each line quivered when the field changed. Kest ran. It leaped from the rail and dropped into mist. Gareth did not call. The dragon rose along the edge of the buoyancy bladder, circled the platform, and climbed into the dusk. It could reach the convoy. It could reach the wild magnetic thermals beyond it. It could vanish into Mariloon's endless cloud bands. Gareth sat beside the shelter with his revoked charter in his lap. Kest circled again. Then it folded its wings, descended, and landed beside him. The platform rang beneath its weight. Kest lay down facing the convoy. Gareth rested his open palm on the deck between them. The dragon placed a claw over it. The first true pulse of the field braid arrived before dark. Every loose object on the platform shifted east. The dead signal mast hummed. Kest's sails lifted without opening. Gareth looked toward the convoy. Its route lamps were changing direction too quickly. He unrolled the charts he had carried ashore. His old passage marks showed broad, safe intervals through the braid, but the current no longer followed the predicted arc. The streamers on the orchard platform snapped one way, then another, each movement followed by the green flashes of automated corrections. Too early. Every machine was answering the visible reversal instead of the field beneath it. Every trained dragon was doing the same. The nearest orchard platform rolled sideways. Fruit trees bent until their trunks split. Lines connecting it to the next garden drew tight. Gareth looked at the dismantled harness components Mail had left in the crate. He placed a coil near Kest's folded wing without activating it. Even unpowered, the metal twitched with the natural current. The branching structures beneath Kest's membrane tightened before the coil moved. He understood. The harness pulses had not merely frightened Kest. They had flooded the developing sails with false reversals, forcing the internal lattice to align, reset, align again. Every command had interrupted the slow work of growth. The frailty had been protection. The hesitation had been precision. Gareth stood and pulled the maintenance platform's conductive rescue line from its locker. The line was meant to anchor repair crews to passing platforms. It would not reach the convoy from here unless something carried it. Kest rose. "No command," Gareth said, "only an offer." He clipped the line to a broad repair ring, not to the dragon. Then he opened his palm toward the storm. Kest watched the convoy. The first platform tore free. Its connecting bridge twisted into the clouds. Workers clung to orchard rails as the garden spun. Farther along the chain, trained dragons launched from their towers, harnesses flashing. They struck the visible currents immediately and were thrown sideways, wings folding under forces they had entered too soon. Mail's voice came through the emergency channel. "Maintenance platform, release the animal. It must respond on my mark." Gareth lifted the transmitter. It never did. A false reversal hit. Kest ran, seized the repair ring in its claws, and leaped. Gareth fed the line through the break. The dragon climbed toward the nearest separated garden. Its sails opened wider than they ever had, and the field lit them from within. Dark branches became silver rivers. The current shifted. Gareth released the brake. Too soon. The line snapped tight, caught the false reversal, and tore through the guide. The broken end whipped across the platform. Gareth turned, but not fast enough. It struck his side and threw him onto a shattered support arm beyond the rail. Pain emptied the sky. He caught metal with both hands. One boot hung over mist. Above him, the rescue line spiraled uselessly away. Kest heard the impact. The dragon turned in flight. Mail's voice burst over the channel. "Return now." Kest folded one wing. For a heartbeat, Gareth thought it would fall. Then he saw the dragon looking down at him. He could not reach the transmitter. He could not lift himself. Blood warmed his shirt beneath the ribs. He freed one hand from the support. Opened his palm. The field indicators on the convoy flashed green. The visible streamers snapped east. Every trained dragon turned. Kest did not. The great slate body hovered inside the violent air, sails shuddering, wading through what every instrument called the correct moment. The pause stretched. The convoy groaned. Another bridge failed. The central seed platform began to rotate, dragging the remaining orchards toward the braid's deepest current. Kest waited. Then the streamers hesitated. The true reversal came without visible warning. Kest opened both storm sails. They did not beat like ordinary wings. They spread until the membranes became a vast curved surface, each branching line catching a different layer of the field. Silver light raced across them. The dragon turned not with the wind, but inside it, anchoring its body between opposing currents. The maintenance platform stopped shaking. The broken rescue line lifted from the clouds and drew toward Kest as if pulled by an invisible hand. The dragon caught it, carried it across the gap, and locked the ring around the nearest orchard tower. The line became a guide. Kest flew along it toward the next platform, then beyond it, spreading the corridor wider with every movement. The field braid bent around the storm sails. One orchard entered the quiet passage. Then another. The platforms followed the line through the only stable interval in the sky. Kest held the corridor. Its left sail began to tear along the old silver scar. The split widened. Gareth shouted its name, though the storm swallowed the sound. Kest could have released. It could have folded the damaged wing and escaped. Instead, it shifted the load across its body and held until the central seed platform passed. Mail stood on its tower beneath a dead harness array, staring upward. The last garden cleared the braid. Kest let go. The corridor collapsed behind it in a burst of silver cloud. The dragon fell. Gareth dragged himself onto the platform as Kest dropped through the mist. For an instant, there was nothing below but violet depth. Then the dark sails opened unevenly. Kest climbed. It struck the maintenance deck hard, skidded across the metal, and stopped with its scarred wings stretched behind it. Gareth crawled to the dragon. Kest's eye opened. Its claw moved across the deck until it found his hand. The Sundrift convoy returned at dawn. No handler approached with a harness. Workers repaired the maintenance platform around Gareth while medics sealed his ribs and laid supports beneath Kest's torn sail. The orchard chain floated close enough that its roots brushed the mist below them. Mail came alone. He stood beside Kest for a long time. The dragon watched him but did not rise. Mail opened the official grading slate. Gareth could see the familiar fields: response speed, carrying force, obedience, flight rank. Mail's thumb moved over the empty rank beside Kest's name. "What grade measures that?" Gareth asked. Mail did not answer. He closed the slate without entering one. Gareth's route charter remained revoked. Mail did not restore it, and Gareth did not ask. The convoy master later offered him passage as an independent observer without authority to command a route. Kest's left sail healed with a thick silver seam. It would never close cleanly again. Fast turns pulled at the scar. Conventional trials were impossible. No one called the dragon failed stock after the field braid. They called it only when the currents became uncertain. Months later, the Sundrift orchards reached the warm side of Mariloon and anchored above a sea of gold cloud. The repaired feeding ledge beneath the root deck had been widened twice, yet Kest still had to fold its enormous body to fit beside Gareth's window. The dragon's slate scales had deepened almost to black. Silver branches remained visible through both sails, and the scarred left one rested at an angle. Gareth sat with new charts spread across his desk. They bore no official seal. He cut a piece from the first ripe orchard fruit of the warm season and placed it on his open palm. Kest lowered its head. The living legend watched his hand. The old interval passed between them. Then Kest chose.